You wake up every morning believing you are free. Free to choose what to eat, what to wear, who to talk to, what to consume. You swipe your finger across your smartphone screen, choose between dozens of apps, customize your timeline, express your opinions. And in this exact moment, while you exercise this apparent freedom, a South Korean philosopher named Byung-Chul Han is telling you a truth that will pierce your illusion like a sharp blade. You have never been as controlled as you are right now. But wait, before you dismiss this idea as another conspiracy theory or academic pessimism, let me ask you a simple question. When was the last time you made a decision that was truly yours? A decision that wasn't influenced by an algorithm, by subliminal advertising, by invisible social pressure, by a performance metric that you internalized without noticing? You hesitated, didn't you? That hesitation is the first sign that Han might be right. We live in the era of total freedom, they say. Freedom of expression, freedom of choice, freedom to be whoever we want to be. But Han, with the surgical precision of a philosopher who sees beyond appearances, reveals something disturbing. We have never been as efficiently controlled as in a society that prides itself on its freedom. Today's control doesn't need chains, doesn't need walls, doesn't need armed guards. Today's control is seductive, it's elegant, it's invisible. And most frightening of all, it's voluntary. You're not being forced into anything. You're being seduced into everything. And this seduction is so sophisticated, so well architected, that you mistake it for freedom. You celebrate your own chains because they've been painted with the rainbow colors of individuality. Han calls this the achievement society, a prison without bars, where the prisoner is simultaneously the jailer and the guard, where you don't need to be controlled because you control yourself, where you don't need to be exploited because you exploit yourself, where you don't need to be watched because you watch yourself. And the diabolic beauty of this system is that it works through your own sense of autonomy. The freer you feel, the more controlled you are, the more choices you have, the more programmed you become. It's the paradox of modern freedom. It is simultaneously the maximum expression and the complete negation of true human autonomy. To understand how we arrived at this golden prison of apparent freedom, we must first comprehend how power has evolved. The ancient Stoics, especially Epictetus, a slave who became one of the greatest philosophers of freedom, taught us to distinguish between what is under our control and what is not. Epictetus knew that even when physically chained, his mind could be free. But Han shows us something even more sinister, a society where our minds are chained precisely through the illusion that they are free. Michel Foucault's disciplinary power, the one that watches, punishes, and shapes docile bodies, was still honest in its brutality. You knew you were being controlled. There was clarity in oppression. The boss was the boss. The prisoner was the prisoner. The oppressor was the oppressor. There was dignity even in resistance, because you knew what you were resisting against. But today's power, what Han calls smart power, doesn't work against you. It works through you. It doesn't repress your desires. It produces them. It doesn't limit your choices. It multiplies them until you get lost in the paralysis of abundance. It doesn't control your body. It colonizes your soul. Think about the last time you opened Instagram. You chose to open it, right? Nobody forced you. You scrolled through posts, liked some photos, maybe posted something yourself. You exercised your freedom of expression, your freedom of social connection. But while you were exercising that freedom, invisible algorithms were mapping your desires, cataloging your insecurities, calibrating your next temptations. You weren't consuming content. You were being consumed by content. And the cruelest part? You were paying for this consumption, not just with money, but with your attention, your time, your vital energy, your capacity for concentration, your ability to be present in the moment. Han identifies this as the transition from disciplinary society to achievement society. In disciplinary society, power said you must. In achievement society, power whispers seductively you can. And this modal shift, from must to can, is the key to your modern enslavement. You can be anything you want to be. You can succeed if you try hard enough. You can be happy if you optimize your life correctly. You can be free if you just choose to be. But this rhetoric of can hides an even deeper coercion. Because if you can, then you must. If you can be successful, then your failure is your fault. If you can be happy, then your sadness is your responsibility. If you can be free, then your sense of imprisonment is your own defect. The achievement subject is not exploited by an external boss. He both boss and employee of himself. He exploits himself more efficiently than any capitalist could ever exploit him, because exploitation comes disguised as self-realization. You work 12 hours a day, not because someone is pointing a gun at your head, but because you chose to be an entrepreneur of yourself. You constantly monitor your productivity, your happiness, your health, your relationships, not because there's a big brother watching you, but because you've internalized Big Brother. And now you are your own cruelest observer. Nietzsche predicted this when he spoke of the last man, the one who invented happiness and blinks his eye. The last man is not oppressed. He is domesticated. He is not controlled. He is seduced. He hasn't lost his freedom. He voluntarily traded it for the illusion of security and pleasure. And Han shows us that this last man is not a future dystopia. It's you. It's me. It's all of us, navigating our lives through optimization apps, wellness metrics, and recommendation algorithms that know our desires better than we know ourselves. The subject of achievement doesn't just work. He works on himself. He doesn't just produce. He produces himself. He doesn't just consume. He consumes himself. And this self-consumption, this auto-cannibalization of the soul, is what we call freedom, authenticity, self-realization. You optimize your sleep with apps that monitor your REM cycles. You optimize your fitness with devices that count your steps and calories. You optimize your meditation with apps that track your mindfulness streaks. You optimize your relationships with dating algorithms that promise to find your perfect match. You optimize your career with LinkedIn metrics that measure your professional influence. You have become what Han calls the entrepreneur of your own self. And like any good entrepreneur, you never stop working, never stop optimizing, never stop performing. Your life has become a startup that must grow 10% every quarter, and you are simultaneously the CEO, the employee, and the product being sold. But here's the most insidious part. This optimization feels good. It feels like progress. It feels like freedom. The gamification of existence provides constant micro-rewards, likes, streaks, achievements, badges, that activate your neurological reward system, just enough to keep you engaged, but never enough to truly satisfy. You are Sisyphus, but instead of being punished by the gods, you chose your own boulder. And you call it self-improvement. Now let's get to what really matters. How this manifests in your concrete life, in your daily decisions, in the way you construct your identity and relationships. You wake up, and the first thing you do is check your smartphone. This isn't a neutral choice. It's a ritual of voluntary submission to what Han calls the digital swarm. You're not just accessing information. You're connecting to a network that will determine your mood, your priorities, your desires for the entire day. The notifications on your phone aren't just alerts. They're soft commands, programmed interruptions to your capacity for deep concentration. Each ping is a small claim on your attention, a micro-fragmentation of your consciousness, and you respond to these commands like Pavlov's dog because you mistake this responsiveness for social connectivity. But Han goes deeper. He shows how this fragmentation of attention isn't a side effect of modern technology. It's its primary objective. A fragmented mind is a mind that cannot form deep thoughts, question fundamental structures, or imagine radical alternatives to the status quo. You are always busy, always productive, always connected, and therefore never truly present, never truly free for the contemplative leisure that ancient philosophers considered essential for wisdom. Think about your career. You probably don't work in a factory with a foreman shouting orders. You work in a flexible, creative environment where you're encouraged to be yourself, to bring your authentic personality to work. But this apparent authenticity is just a more sophisticated form of value extraction. It's not just your labor power being exploited. It's your creativity, your spontaneity, your capacity for innovation, even your happiness. You're not just selling your hours. You're selling your soul. And you're doing it voluntarily, even enthusiastically, because you've been convinced this is personal fulfillment. Modern corporate culture doesn't need to break your resistance. It channels it for its own purposes. Your rebelliousness becomes disruptive thinking. Your creativity becomes innovation. Your authenticity becomes personal branding. You're not resisting the system. You're feeding it with your own vital energy. And social media. Oh, these are the masterpiece of this elegant control. You're not being censored. You're being curated. Algorithms don't determine what you can see. They determine what you want to see. They don't control your opinions. They constantly confirm them, creating echo chambers so comfortable that you mistake confirmation bias for freedom of thought. You post a photo, write an opinion, share a personal moment, and receive likes, comments, validation. Each interaction activates your neurological reward system. You're not sharing your life. You're transforming your life into content. You're not expressing yourself. You're performing yourself. And the most insidious part, you're doing this for free. No, worse than free. You're paying for the opportunity to be exploited. You pay for your smartphone, for your internet connection, for your app subscriptions, to have the privilege of transforming your life into data that will be sold to advertisers who will try to manipulate your desires. Han calls this surveillance capitalism. But a surveillance that you request, that you voluntarily install, that you carry in your pocket, as if it were a freedom amulet. Even your search for well-being has become a form of control. You meditate using an app that monitors your progress. You exercise while a device counts your steps. You sleep while another gadget analyzes your sleep quality. You optimize your happiness as if it were a startup that needs to grow 10% per quarter. You're not taking care of yourself. You're managing yourself as if you were a human resource, and you are simultaneously the manager and the resource. You've internalized business logic so deeply that you apply performance metrics even to the most intimate aspects of your existence. Your relationships don't escape either. You swipe left or right on dating apps, treating love like a matching algorithm. You document your relationships on social media, transforming intimacy into spectacle. You optimize your social connections through strategic networking. And when your relationships fail, when you feel anxious, when you question the meaning of life, the answer you receive isn't philosophical or existential. It's therapeutic and pharmacological. You need to work on yourself. You need to find your purpose. You need to balance your neurotransmitters. The very language of self-help and personal development is the language of business optimization applied to the human soul. You're not a complex human being navigating the mysteries of existence. You're a project to be perfected, a problem to be solved, a system to be optimized. But here's what Han wants you to understand. This isn't happening to you. You're doing it to yourself, and that's precisely what makes it so effective. External oppression creates resistance. Self-oppression creates complicity. You have become what the Frankfurt School called the one-dimensional man. But with a crucial twist, you chose your own dimension. You have flattened yourself into a data point, a consumer profile, a productivity metric, a happiness index. And you call this flattening personal growth. So here we are, standing before the abyss that Han has opened beneath our feet. The question that remains is devastatingly simple. If our freedom is illusory, if our control is self-imposed, if our autonomy is an elaborate performance, what can we do? The first temptation is nihilism. If everything is an illusion, if there's no escape, if the system is so sophisticated that it has co-opted even our resistance, then why try? But this temptation is itself part of the system. Paralyzing cynicism is as useful to power as naive optimism. Han doesn't offer us easy solutions because there are no easy solutions, but he offers us something more valuable: clarity. And with clarity comes the possibility of real choice, not the illusion of choice that the market offers us, but the fundamental choice between lucidity and sleepwalking. True freedom, Han teaches us, echoing the ancient Stoics, begins with the recognition of our chains. Epictetus knew that a slave who recognizes his slavery is closer to freedom than a free man who doesn't recognize his own prisons. You cannot liberate yourself from a system you cannot see. And the current system is almost invisible precisely because it disguises itself as freedom. But once you see it, once you recognize the strings that move your choices, the algorithms that shape your desires, the metrics that define your worth, something fundamental changes. You can no longer be manipulated in the same way. Not because you've become immune to manipulation, nobody is immune, but because you've developed what Han calls the art of pausing, the ability to create space between stimulus and response, the ability to say no, the ability to be bored, to be alone with your thoughts, to resist the constant urgency of being always connected, always productive, always optimized. Real resistance is not political, it's ontological. It's not about changing the system, it's about changing your relationship with the system. It's about recovering your capacity for contemplation, your tolerance for silence, your ability to be present without documenting presence. It's about rediscovering what Heidegger called serenity, not the passive serenity of resignation, but the active serenity of one who has chosen not to be chosen by forces he doesn't understand. This means deliberate moments of disconnection, not as a productivity tactic, digital detox to be more efficient, but as an act of ontological rebellion. Moments where you exist without being observed, without being measured, without being optimized. It means cultivating relationships that cannot be quantified, conversations that don't generate content, experiences that don't become posts, thoughts that don't become tweets, an inner life that remains inner. It means accepting boredom, existential anxiety, the feeling of being lost, not as problems to be solved, but as fundamental aspects of the human condition that the current system tries to medicate or optimize away from us. It means recognizing that true freedom is not the ability to choose between predetermined options, but the ability to question why these are the only available options. And perhaps most radically, It means accepting that you don't need to be special. You don't need to be optimized. You don't need to have a personal brand. You don't need to maximize your potential. You can simply be, not the authentic being that the market wants to sell you, but the being that exists before and after all performances of identity. Han reminds us that true freedom is always paradoxical. It's not the absence of limitations, but the conscious choice of the right limitations. It's not the infinite expansion of possibilities, but the ability to say no to possibilities that don't serve your deepest humanity. Achievement Society wants you to believe that your freedom consists in being able to be anything, but true freedom might consist in choosing to be something specific, even if that means renouncing everything else. And this choice, the choice to be instead of perform, to exist instead of optimize, to live instead of document, this choice cannot be made by an algorithm. It can only be made by you. This is what Han wants you to understand. Your freedom wasn't taken from you. It was obscured, distorted, channeled toward ends that aren't yours, but it's still there, waiting to be reclaimed. The question is, do you have the courage to be truly free? Or do you prefer the elegant security of your voluntary control? The choice is yours. And this, perhaps, is the only choice that really matters. But remember, making this choice requires something that Achievement Society has almost completely eroded: the capacity for what the ancients called philosophical contemplation. The ability to step back from the rushing stream of stimulation and ask the fundamental questions: who am I when I'm not performing? What do I want when I'm not being marketed to? What is my life when it's not being optimized? These questions have no apps. They have no metrics. They cannot be gamified or optimized or shared on social media. They can only be lived in the silence of your own consciousness, in the space between breaths, where you remember that you are not a human resource, not a data point, not a performance metric. You are a human being, and that, in itself, is a form of resistance. The system needs you to forget this. Your freedom depends on remembering it. Choose wisely. The future of human dignity depends on it.